Namaste and welcome to this exciting new episode of Sathology Debunking Mythology. Sat means truth, Logos means a study or science, Sathology means a science of truth, study of truth. Opposite of that is myth, Sanskrit word, root word myth, which is means a fake lie imagination. Mythology means a science or study of fake lie imagination. So our attempt is to present you the right history in the best possible way through discussions, and you you have to understand that there are many people who move the history and they're not in the textbooks, especially the academics have particularly ignored the greatest leader from which state I also belong to in India, and Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. So without delay, let us welcome Sri Prashant Pol, a very leading writer and also commentator and historian in a personal interest. So namaskar, Prashantji.
Namaskar.
So, Prashantji, today we have seen most of the regular historians have vanished. They have become very left oriented. Now the engineers are turning into historians and writing. There's so many. You, me, Nilesh Oak, all of us, our background is engineering, everyone.
Correct. Correct.
Why is this phenomena before we start on the topic?
It attracts us. And if you put a engineering mind in the history, then you will find a lot of things which were not there in the textbooks, which were not there, which were not taught to us. So naturally, as the engineer mind tries to find out that what was hidden into that. So that's why I think engineers are more inclined towards the history.
Yeah, it is a phenomena now I'm seeing. Somebody was telling me, and I was making a list of who is an engineer. 90% of people who come, they are all science backgrounds.
Yeah.
And they are interested in history, and I think the academics don't accept them because they say that you have no history. I said that's the biggest qualification we have. We are not partial to the topic now.
Yes.
So
Very true.
Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, there is a very nice saying, Atak se Katak tak and Kashmir se Kanyakumari. This was his contribution. So
Yeah.
today we want to talk about that. Before we start off, what made Hindavi Swarajya as a slogan for Shivaji Maharaj?
I think we must understand the situation during the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, because as we all are aware, the Muslim invaders came to India in the 11th century. They came to India even prior to that, and they attacked the western part of India, which is today we called it as Pakistan. But the Indian kings fought bravely, and they could stop them. But then in the 11th century and 12th century, the invaders came to India with force, and even they reached to the southern part of the country. So almost most of the part of the country was under the Islam, and except a few, there are few exceptions like Vijayanagar Samrajya. This Vijayanagar Empire was ruling almost the entire southern part of the country, but barring that, most of the part was ruled by the Islamic invaders, and because of that, the entire mindset of the people was towards this not towards, but kind of a Islamic culture was there in the language, in the other processes, giving the justice and all. Everywhere the Islamic culture was dominant, and the roots of the Hindu culture were not really seen. And that's where Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj have thought that we should bring our roots, and the roots, our culture, our heritage was really rich enough. From his mother Jizabai, he used to hear all the tales of our the great past. He used to listen about the great uh, even the Vijayanagar Samrajya, the great King Ashoka, and the great education system of India, and so many things. So naturally he thought that we should have our roots, our culture, our heritage back. And that's the reason he thought to set up a Hindavi Swarajya again, because it is not that he has created the Hindavi Swarajya, he has recreated the Hindavi Swarajya, that way we can say. after a gap of so many 100 years. So that was the inspiration, I think, to Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj.
So, in during this period, we see towards the end of Shivaji Maharaj history, we see right from Kabul the influence of Marathas there, and I think there's a joke people say, and it's a negative, that most of the Mughals were inside the forts; they were not outside the forts. Is
Yes.
that true?
Uh, yes, up to certain extent, yes, because Mughals couldn't get the resistance. Wherever they got the resistance, I think Mughal couldn't really stand. And therein, I'm coming to that. I mean, my whole, saying this is that the impact of Chhatrapati Shivaji is very important, and for that, why Shivaji Maharaj is called as the great king of India, because I think there are some four things which made him really great. The first is his warfare, the way he fought. Second is his administration, because the common public, common people were really admiring him. They loved him as such that every common citizen during that period became a soldier of Chhatrapati Shivaji. Then his love to his own culture, his language, his heritage, his religion. And the fourth one is his progressive outlook. So I think these four things made Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj as a great king of India, and that too also can, his impact was such that uh, I will come to that later. But how the Mughals have literally vanished, sort of vanished, and only Maratha kingdom was there, or Hindu kingdom was there, from Atak to Katak, uh, almost the entire part of the country. And for that, whenever we say that he was a great warrior, he sort of found out, or rather, he used the guerrilla warfare technique. So he was a very tactical warrior, very brave, but as a tactical warrior as well. He knew exactly how to fight with the enemy, and for that, he exactly used four Fs, which are there and which are considered as the most important four Fs in the Western warfare techniques. One is to find the enemy. We must understand who is your enemy. So to find the enemy, and after find the enemy, to fix the enemy. After fixing the enemy, to fight the enemy, and after fighting the enemy, to finish the enemy. So he used to find them, fix them, fight them, and then finish them. And that exactly, if it every move if we see, it did the same thing. Take an example of, attack by Afzal Khan. Afzal Khan during that period was considered as the most horrible sort of kind of Sardar from uh, Vizapur dynasty, we can say, or Vizapur Empire. When Muslims came to India, initially, naturally, they came from northern part, so northwest part, they came to India, and they were ruling the Delhi, Agra, and that part. But then in the 12th century, they came to the southern part of India, and in the southern part of India, there were five Muslim empires. First, there were one, it's called Bahmani Empire, and that Bahmani empires was then divided into five Muslim empires. And these five Muslim empires were initially were fighting with each other, but when they have to fight with the Hindu empire, Vijayanagar kingdom, then they all were united and they fought with Vijayanagar kingdom, and then almost they have won that battle. But when Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj was there were almost two southern Muslim empires were there. One was Vizapur, and other was Qutub Shahi, that was in Hyderabad, today's Hyderabad. It used to be called Bhagyanagar in those days. So Bhagyanagar and Vijapur, those were the two kingdoms. Now, this Afzal Khan was a commandant of this Vizapur empire. He was a terrorist. His terror was up to Sri Lanka. And when it was announced that Afzal Khan is going to attack a very small kingdom of Chhatrapati Shivaji, it was the year 1659. Shivaji Maharaj started to build his sort of kingdom in the age of 16 years, 15, 16, 17 years. So almost in the 1647, 1648, from there onwards to 59, not much of the years, not much of the time, and only say 10, 12 years was old. That his empire was only 10, 12 years old, not very big, relatively small. But because it was the own empire, the Hindu Swarajya, that's why every Muslim empire and the other sort of invaders, later on they became the invaders, like Britishers, like Portuguese, like Dutch. They all were really eagerly looking that what's going to happen. They knew that this Afzal Khan is going to kill Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, and then this very small kingdom will get finished, and then no one will even dare to create his own Swarajya. So when Afzal Khan came, Shivaji Maharaj knew that who is the enemy? Afzal Khan. He fixed him. He didn't come into his trap, because uh, Afzal Khan tried to invoke Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's feelings by by disturbing the temple of Tulsa Bhavani, and did lot of other things. But Shivaji Maharaj has set up his own strategy how to fight with Afzal Khan. So he was at the Pratapgarh, and at the down of the it was on the hill, and the down of that Pratapgarh there was a dense forest called Javli. So somehow tactically he brought him into this Javli, and he was in the Pratapgarh. It was decided that on the 10th of November 1659 they were supposed to meet. They met, and during that meeting, Shivaji was wearing a tiger cloth, because he knew that Afzal Khan was there just to kill me. He was quite aware about it, and there was no ambiguity in that. He was very clear in his mind. So, who made the first attack is really not really important. Important is, with this tiger claws and his sword, Shivaji killed the Afzal Khan, and we all know, most of the people knew that up the story up to that Shivaji, killed Afzal Khan, and the battle was won by the Shivaji, and Shivaji looted all the whatever with his army and all. Everything was there. Shivaji's uh, at his property. But the actual story starts from there, and that shows that the how Shivaji was visionary, how Shivaji was really planning in advance, in detail. So in the afternoon, 2 o'clock, 10th November 1659, Shivaji killed Afzal Khan. He immediately ascended, came to the Pratapgarh fort. He just changed his cloth, discussed with his colleagues what to do next and all. It was all decided. He just took a review of that, and immediately, without waiting, without taking a rest, he immediately gone to fight. And then he went towards the towards the south side, towards the Kolhapur region. His army general, Netaji Palkar, he asked him to go into the east, that is, attack directly to Bijapur, the capital of this Muslim empire. And another, his captain, Dauloji, he asked him to go into the western part, western ghats called Konkan. And the beauty is, after 18th day, that is on 20th November 1659, Shivaji Maharaj took the great fort of Panhala. Panhala was very close to Kolhapur, and it was a very difficult fort otherwise to win, but he won that. And even before that, Netaji Palkar, the army general, he went to very close to Vijapur. If Netaji Palkar would have some little more force, Netaji Palkar would have even conquered the Vijapur also. That was the stage. And Dauloji also took some forts. So within those 18 days, from 10th November to 28th November, within those 18 days, Shivaji's empire was more than double. And this is the best example how one can find an opportunity from any kind of danger or any kind of attack or any kind of such things. This is the real example, and this shows the Shivaji's ability as a warrior, as a brave soldier in that sense, and as a great planner, and how to it was a surprise attack element that was there, and Shivaji knew that the surprise attack element is really going to work. It worked, and that's how the Shivaji have increased his the total area of his kingdom, small kingdom. We can quote so many such example like that as regards to his warfare is concerned. uh, Equally, his administration is also very strong, very strong. I mean, he was the person who created the cabinet. Today we call it as a cabinet, but Shivaji has this. And all these Muslim invaders, they didn't have the kind of cabinet and all. They had some few other people, but ultimately, the whosoever was the empire, the Sultan, he used to decide everything. He used to decide. He even didn't care to take the uh, uh, you know what you are thinking and what you're feeling and all. That was not there. It was only the decision of the empire or the Sultan that was more important. But what Shivaji did, Shivaji formed a cabinet which he called it as a Ashtapradhan. And this Ashtapradhan was very important because through Ashtapradhan, he used to run the day-to-day business of the entire kingdom, entire empire. And that was very effective. His Ashtapradhan was having the Peshwa. Peshwa was supposed to be sort of a, you call it as a prime minister, sort of. Or if the Shivaji we consider as a prime minister, then Peshwa is the home minister or the major this thing. Then Amatya. Amatya is basically the minister of finance. So that is Amatya. He's supposed to look after all the financial matters. Then there was Mantri or Vaknis. He was supposed to look after the Chhatrapati Shivaji's daily routine and his plan, where is he supposed to go, the arrangements and all those things. Then there was another Sachiv called Surnis. Surnis was looking after all the administrative part, that is the correspondence with so many other people and all. Then there used to be a foreign minister called Sumanta. This foreign minister was supposed to be responsible to have a dialogue with so many other empires, kingdoms, even the other countries also. And and another one was the army chief general, that was called Senapati or Sar Naubat. There was also a minister called Pandit Rao. Pandit Rao was supposed to be responsible for the religious matter and to looking after all the religious matter and to charity work and to welfare of the people and all. And the last one was the judge, Nyayadhish, who is supposed to look after the total judgment and all, the legal system of the empire. So this is how he has created his own cabinet, and that's how he used to run his administration, and that's why it was very systematical administration which Chhatrapati Shivaji has run.
So generally, there was a misconception spread that the Hindu rate of growth by many politicians earlier, but we see that the Hindu rate of growth has always resulted in prosperity.
Yes.
We have the dharmic way is thinking, like we want to evaluate whether it's hurting the environment, whether it is hurting something else. In the Western world, there is no such consideration. Even today, when you see the Indian democracy, despite being all the challenges, we are trying to take everyone together. If
Yes.
anybody complains about democracy, they should live in the US. They will know immediately, because you cannot ask much questions. If you ask too many questions, you're put in the jail, even in the USA. And there are no laws to protect. Like many Indians are commenting on the Twitter rules.
Yes.
I'm slightly digressing, but I'll bring back to the point where Twitter rules. America has no rule of protection for the citizens. Like if somebody is banned by the Twitter, you cannot go anywhere. It's done. Yeah. So now coming back to, the good governance, good behavior, good character, and a strong military. were the very foundation of Shivaji Maharaj. So in military, you already mentioned the guerrilla warfare he introduced, and the in the administration, you said that he was equal to everybody because there was a sizable Muslim population also, and there were many Muslims serving in Shivaji Maharaj's army also. So that is also is a fact. What do you have to say on that?
Sorry, let me interrupt you. This is a misconception. Always they portray Chhatrapati Shivaji as a secular, and this is something which I don't agree. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj is secular is something like telling him that he is a king, he is a Marathi speaking, he is from in Maratha, he is a like that. He is a man like that. It's as simple as that. He was secular because he was a Hindu. Every Hindu is by nature and by culture is secular, and in that perspective, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj was 100% secular in all aspects. But secular because he is a secular. That's why he is great. This concept is wrong. Second thing is that he always respected all religions. He always respected, and there are hundreds of examples of that. Even when he raided Surat to compensate the Shaiste Khan's expenditure, or Shaiste Khan destroyed the entire region for 3 years. So to compensate that, he raided Surat. But while this raid, he protected the English church, and the Britishers have written that he has protected the English church. So he had respected, and he has a respect to everyone, every religion, including Muslim. But but he was a real Hindu in that sense, because he was a Hindu, he was a secular in that sense, because that comes in the nature. But in a when he went to the south, he heard that recently one temple was demolished and a mosque was built. He ordered his all soldiers and his captains to demolish the mosque and reconstruct the temple, because earlier there was a temple. So he was very straightforward about it. He knew how to handle the enemy. So therein he was very clear. Number two is that he was not having a large number of Muslims in his army. That is a misconception. But whoever Muslims were there in his army, they were treated equally. There are absolutely equal treatment to all the Muslim soldiers who were serving in Shivaji's army. But again, I say, and I repeat, that Muslims were not in a large number in Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's army. They were in a very small numbers. Those who were there, they really liked Shivaji Maharaj, because Shivaji Maharaj is a very nice person. He honor all the people, including women and all, and that's why people really liked him. And that's why, because of that only, few Muslim soldiers were there, and not only soldiers, there were some chief to this, some of the units were there in his army. But as I said, that it's not that he just wanted to have so many Muslims and all those things. That was not. He was secular because by birth he was a secular, because he was a Hindu. But what he basically tries to do, as I said, that he was very well aware that how Hindu dharma was basically kind of destroyed. They're trying to destroy this Hindu dharma all over the country. He had seen that, and when he went to Agra also, he had seen that. And it was Aurangzeb who put the jizya kar on Hindus. It was, the text was only on the Hindus. There was a custom duty, which was, there certain custom duty which was 10% for the Hindus, and half of that 5% was only on the Muslims. So there were totally biased nature, behavior, and everything in this all the Muslim empires, and they were demolishing, they were destroying the Hindu temples all over the country. Chhatrapati Shivaji was aware about that, but just because of their destroying the Hindu temple, Shivaji didn't destroy the mosque. But the moment he heard that there was a temple, and recently it was destroyed by the Muslims, he destroyed that mosque and recreated the temple. So that's how the Shivaji was. Moreover, he was very concerned about the attack of this Farsi language or Arabic language on the day-to-day work of the people. Because in the administration, in the entire law system, in the financial matters, in the correspondence, everywhere, there are a lot of Arabic words or Farsi words used to be there, for which people were really not aware about it. They were using the words, even they didn't know the meaning of that. And that's why when he did the Rajabhishek, that is, he refounded again the Hindavi Swarajya in the June 1674. He created a Rajya Vyavahara Kosh. This Rajya Vyavahara Kosh was a dictionary wherein the similar words to Farsi or Arabic words were given in Sanskrit. So all the Farsi words, there was a synonymous or there was a parallel Sanskrit word was given, and he ordered people. He found that he made it sure that in his own correspondence and in his otherwise administration, people try to use the Sanskrit word because those were the original words. That's what he tried. So he was very well concerned about that, and that shows his love towards his own language. Yes, that's what I wanted to say about his those. I mean,
No, very good point, because very few people know it. It's a propaganda, and
yes,
people, it's a mythology. When you say
the mythology. Absolutely correct. It was mythology.
because people are misrepresenting and just trying to claim that one of the greatest Hindu kings was actually, Sanatan Dharma makes everybody equal to everyone else,
Yes, absolutely correct.
and that's the
Absolutely.
beauty of Sanatan Dharma. Now, one of the another misconception is, you touched upon education in a briefly, because education and trade was also flourishing during Shivaji Maharaj's time.
Yes.
So, why was that? What was the reason of that?
Okay. First of all, Shivaji, Chhatrapati Shivaji was having a very progressive outlook. Now, just to quote that, there are a couple of things I would like to tell about that. His army general, Netaji Palkar, he went to Vizapur, that Adil Shahi, in the year 1666, when Shivaji Maharaj has surrendered to Mirza Raja Jai Singh. Mirza Raja Jai Singh was a Mughal Sardar. He came on behalf of Aurangzeb to conquer the Maharashtra. So Chhatrapati Shivaji has to surrender because Chhatrapati Shivaji couldn't find that they were troubling, torturing the common people in Swarajya. So he surrendered. But after that, in within a very small this thing during the fight with the Panalgarh, Shivaji and Netaji Palkar has some misconception. That's what people say. Or there is another theory that Shivaji Maharaj has fielded Netaji Palkar into this Islamic forces deliberately, because Shivaji knew that probably he has to go to Agra and all those things. Probably. I mean, that's what people see. So Netaji Palkar was there in the Adil Shahi, and the moment Shivaji was supposed to go to Agra, he joined the Mughal forces under the Mirza Raja Jai Singh. So that was probably a planned activity of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. There is no such proof, but that's what people could feel, that could be the reason. Netaji Palkar, but the moment Shivaji escaped from Agra, in spite of Aurangzeb, a lot of his very strong arrangements he has made that Shivaji shouldn't go out and all, but somehow Shivaji Maharaj could escape from there. The moment Aurangzeb knew that Shivaji Maharaj has escaped, he asked Mirza Raja Jai Singh to take in custody the Netaji Palkar. And this Netaji Palkar, or Netoji Palkar it was called, to him, Aurangzeb sent him in the eastern part, in the northern part, that is in the Kabul front. 10 years Netaji was there, and after 10 years he came back to this thing due to that, and then he got escaped from Mughal forces and he came to Shivaji, Chhatrapati Shivaji. Now that time, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj has converted him back into Hindutva. No, this was not a general practice. This was not a general practice. And this was not even accepted by those days, the Brahmins. But Shivaji Maharaj was very firm on that. That he was, by mistake, he had gone to Islam, because Netaji Palkar was converted to Islam by Aurangzeb. So Netaji Palkar was converted back to Hinduism, and that's what Shivaji Maharaj did. So he has a very progressive outlook. Second example I would like to quote. long back, I think in the year 1994, when I visited San Diego, no, San Jose. I was there in the Bay Area because on my business work. I'd been there. So I was, my host was an Indian from Bengal. He used to take me to various places there in the Bay Area, and he was showing me, look, this is how the drive-in concept in America is very popular and very nice and very useful for the people and all. So if you go to the McDonald's joint, it's a drive-in. Just go there by car, sitting at car, and then you can have that, pay that, and you can have that, like that. So drive-in ATM, drive-in shopping, drive-in this, drive-in that. Prior to that, I also visited Europe. I visited Japan. So it was not much to me, but still, let me honestly tell you, I got impressed up to a certain extent that yes, oh yeah, the driving is really very great. Then after a few years, when I went to Raigad, Raigad was the capital of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Empire. So when I went to Raigad, on top of that hill, Raigad is a fort, a very strong fort, which is on a very top of very huge hill. On that hill, there is a plain ground. On that ground, there is a Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj statue is there, very big statue. In front of him, both the sides, there are huge platforms on a line. So many platforms are there. Each platform is around 6 to 7 feet high. And so many platforms are there. And there are a little stairs to go upside on the that platform. I asked my guide why these platforms are there on this ground. He said, it's very simple. Shivaji Maharaj soldiers, when they used to come to Raigad for some shopping, they all were riding on the horse. Now, where they should keep the horse? I mean, naturally, they should be, they should riding the horse, and while they are riding, they should do some shopping. That's why on these platforms, all the traders and all were there, and these soldiers used to purchase their grocery, their vegetables, fruits, etc., while riding on the horses. Let me tell you, there were goosebumps on me because this is a real drive-in concept. Now, we are saying that these Americans are modern because they have created this drive-in 60, 70 years back. Now, Shivaji Maharaj has created this drive-in concept that was around 350 years back. So this was his progressive outlook, the modern outlook. This is how the Shivaji Maharaj was thinking. His thinking was much ahead than a common person can think. When he went to after his Rajabhishek and all, that he became the real empire in the through the Hindu Vedokta Shastra Paddhati, we call it. He became the real empire of Hindu Swarajya. Then he went to south, and therein he found a fort called Jinji, and he liked it very well. He fought that fort, he conquered that fort, he did some fortification of that fort, and he said that this could be our capital. And he was so very true that after his death, and after his son Sambhaji Maharaj also died 9 years after Shivaji Maharaj's death, then the another son, second son, Rajaram Maharaj, he made this Jinji as the capital. Jinji is at the southernmost part of the country. But he made this as a capital of the entire Swarajya, and he was controlling the Swarajya, monitoring, managing, administrating the Swarajya from the Jinji. And that's how he could fight with Aurangzeb. And so what I mean to say is that the Shivaji's vision was very clear, and it was he was really visionary in all that sense, I must say.
Prashant Polji, one of the things which comes there is that people claim that 80% of the armies of Aurangzeb was Rajputs. How true is that now? Because, Shivaji Maharaj, the word secular actually means anti-church. That's the actual meaning of secular. I don't know why India has misinterpreted, because English is not their main language. And, people like you and me, when we research on these topics, secularism was invented to keep church out of the government. Pretty clear. This was the reason, main reason. Okay, and that's why countries which have kept the church outside the government are all prosperous. All the West, all the European countries who practice that, England, USA, uh, and Canada, in all these countries, church is outside the government. Mexico, South American countries, church is inside the government. Look at the condition today. It's one of the poorest countries, including Mexico, which is a very rich country. It's the 11th largest economy in the world, but it's still a poor country because the church is in the government. Now, in India, the secular word is taken, blown out of proportions,
Correct.
and completely misrepresented altogether. Now, when we say secular is a glorified word in India, they should also know the real meaning, keeping church outside the government. And today, church is the biggest landowner. At that time, during Shivaji Maharaj's time, this was not there much. So in Shivaji Maharaj's time, when we say that he was, I would say he was more dharmic. Dharmic means neither left nor right. We are follow the law of the nature, which is dharma. So when we say Shivaji Maharaj was dharmic, not secular, but Aurangzeb, they say, is secular, and but not dharmic. Like, it's a very confusing now wordplay now here. Secular but not dharmic. So how true is that he had 80% of Muslims in his army, Rajputs in his army?
Rajput, right. Yes, I think it may not be the percentage wise. There may be little here and there. It may not be 80%. Some people say it's 60%. Some people say it's 80%. But it is certain that more than 50%, more than half of his army was of Rajput, and the Sardar like this Mirza Raje Jai Singh, he was a true Rajput fellow. He was a Parama Bhakta, that is a real disciple of Lord Shiva, Eklingaji, Bhagwan Eklingaji he used to call. And without doing the puja of Eklingaji, Bhagwan Eklingaji, he even didn't used to take even the glass of water. I mean, he was so sacred in that sense. But imagine to whom he has come to fight with, a person like Chhatrapati Shivaji, who was trying to form a Hindavi Swarajya. And that's basically the unfortunate part of our country, that so many Rajput Sardar, so many Rajput soldiers, they were fighting on behalf of Mughals, on behalf of Marathas, were fighting on behalf of this Adil Shahi, Qutub Shahi, Nizam Shahi. That was the sad part of it. And that's why Shivaji has to fight with whom? With Mirza Raja Jai Singh. So that's basically the problem of it. And yes, it is true that a lot of Rajput, Sardar, a lot of Rajput soldiers fight for Aurangzeb, and that's the reason Aurangzeb could have his Mughal empire up to Kabul and even beyond that. Yes, it is true.
The Shivaji Maharaj set a foundation for much more expansion during Bajirao 1, 2, Peshwa times. The Peshwas were very loyal to that culture, and we also see the Western. When we talk about the Kabul and other places, do you think that the Shivaji Maharaj had a regional capital in that area also, Kabul and other areas in Afghanistan?
I think that's a very good point which you have raised, and therein I would like to highlight. What I would like to highlight is, in my school times, unfortunately, Shivaji, I didn't learn a lot, because in my school books, Shivaji was only 1 or 2 chapters, wherein the Mughal Empire was 3 or 4 pages. So that's how I studied. But during my school time, I remember the Mughal empires like Akbar, then Jahangir, then Shah Jahan, then Aurangzeb and all. What after Aurangzeb? If I ask a question to everyone, that we know the Shah Jahan, Akbar and Jahangir and so many other things, who is after Aurangzeb? And people really didn't able to tell. They will not able to tell, because Aurangzeb was almost that way the last emperor of Mughal Samrajya. After that, Mughal Samrajya Mughal Empire was going down and down. And that is the major impact of Chhatrapati Shivaji on India. That I would like to say. Why? Because when Chhatrapati Shivaji has his Hindavi Swaraj in the, that kingdom, that empire, that was not very large, but it was very powerful. It was very, and it was on its own swabhiman, on its own this thing, and that's why all these Muslim invaders, their empires, they were quite worried about Shivaji Maharaj. And Aurangzeb was really worried about Shivaji. When Aurangzeb died, what he wrote about in his last letter, he wrote about Shivaji and he praised Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. One has to really read that. At least their translation of that, he wrote in Farsi. One must literally read that letter from Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb praised. Aurangzeb said that it was a Shivaji who really honored the woman everywhere. Shivaji was very well known about it. His character was really totally clean. Everyone, even his enemy, have to praise about the character of Chhatrapati Shivaji. But that's not my point. My point here is that when Shivaji Maharaj died in the 1680, immediately 1 year after that, that is 1681, Aurangzeb came to Maharashtra, that is in the Dakshin, that is in the south part of India, just to finish this Maratha Empire or Hindavi Swarajya. That's what his whole aim. So he came with, in Sanskrit we call it Chaturanga Sena. This means that a huge and large force of more than 300,000 people. So more than 300,000 soldiers with lot of ammunition, lot of guns and lot of swords, this and everything, with lot of horses, lot of soldiers. He came with a total prepared this thing just to finish up that, and he thought that it will take a couple of years to finish this Hindavi Swaraj, and then he will go back to Agra or Delhi. But 1681 he came to Maharashtra. He tried to see that they will will not win, and he will somehow try to finish the Marathas. He couldn't. Somehow he got Sambhaji Maharaj, Shivaji Maharaj's son, elder son, Sambhaji, and he killed Sambhaji Maharaj with lot of giving him torture. After Sambhaji Maharaj was killed, he thought now it's very simple. It's just a matter of not even a couple of years, just 6 months to 1 year, and I will conquer all these forts of this Maratha king, and then I will go back. Where is question of 6 months, 1 year? Rajaram became the again Chhatrapati, and Rajaram, because in the entire Maharashtra portion and Karnataka, this Mughal soldiers were Mughal army was there. So Rajaram somehow tried to escape and went to Jinji, which Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj had considered that it could be a capital of Swarajya when Aurangzeb will come with lot of army. From there, this Rajaram Maharaj, 9 years, Rajaram Maharaj made this as a capital of Swarajya, and he fought from there. In the year 1700, that's 11 years after Sambhaji Maharaj died, Rajaram Maharaj also died in Swarajya. Aurangzeb thought now it's fine. Aurangzeb became old one, but his question was there. He said no, somehow, because it's a jihad. He wrote on his lot of correspondence that it is a jihad because it was a Hindu empire, and he didn't want any Hindu empire. There was even the Vizapur empire was there, which was Muslim empire. Aurangzeb also wanted to conquer that. He conquered Adil Shahi. But he couldn't conquer this Hindavi Samrajya, and that's what his pain area. So he thought that now Sambhaji has gone, Rajaram has gone. So I mean, naturally now it's just a question of probably an year. Ultimately, in the year 1707, Aurangzeb died in the soil of Maharashtra, and he couldn't conquer the Hindavi Samrajya. Then all the Mughal Sena, Mughal force, Mughal army went back to Agra without conquering Maratha. Then this Hindavi Samrajya became even stronger. Shahu Maharaj became the Chhatrapati, and Peshwas became more stronger. And Bajirao Peshwa, the first Bajirao Peshwa, he even went up to Delhi and he conquered Delhi. And after that, like Sadashivara Bhau Peshwa and all, they fought the Panipat the Battle of Panipat, the third Battle of Panipat, and the this Peshwa, Raghoba Dada Peshwa, even went up to place called Attak, which is in Afghanistan. So Attak to Cuttack, Cuttack is in Orissa. So from this Afghanistan to Orissa, it was great empire of Marathas or Hindu empire. So the Hindu empire, Hindu Swarajya, which Aurangzeb wanted to conquer, he couldn't do that. 26, 27 years, he has to spend his life in Maharashtra. He couldn't go back to north, to Delhi. And on the contrary, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's vision, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's whole planning, and his all character is such that every common person in Swarajya became the soldier. They fought with Mughals, they fought with Islamic invaders, and after the death of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, 138 years, this Maratha Empire was there from Attak to Cuttack, and they literally ruled. And during that their rule, as you rightly said, the education was flourished because they respect the education. They knew that the old education system was great of India. So it was not only education; it was agriculture. The way they looked after the agriculture. Like Ahilyabai Holkar, she did a really great about how the agriculture and how the welfare of the common people could be there. So a very good, well kind of state was created by this after 138 years. And on the contrary, if we talk about this Mughal emperor, we do not know who is after Aurangzeb, because it's very difficult. After every 4-5 years, one after another Mughal empire used to come, and then a situation came at the end of the 18th century, then when this Mughal empire has to plead the Maratha soldiers or Maratha Sardar, that Maratha captains, that please save the Delhi. And on the save Delhi campaign only, because of that, Maratha, this Peshwas went to Panipat to fight this Ahmad Shah Abdali, who was an invader who came from Afghanistan. And there are 14 years at the end of the 18th century, 14 years, the Hindavi Swarajya flag, that is saffron flag, was there on the Red Fort in Delhi. So we can see that the impact of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj is such that after 138 years, this Hindavi Samrajya was there, almost most part of the country. And because these Britishers could conquer this Maratha Empire, they became the ruler of India. And that shows that it was a Shivaji, because of him, because of his inspiration, that Hindavi Swarajya was there from Attak to Cuttack. And that's the reason India became more, during that time was, it was well in terms of business, in terms of education, in terms of other things also. Yes.
After the Maharaj Ranjit Singh, 1711, he was during the 1700s, early 1700s to late 1700s was Ranjit Singh Maharaj's empire. After that, the first Dharmic empire was Maratha Empire, and you can also say that it became as big, if not bigger, or as big, almost as big as Chola Empire, as Cholas.
Yes.
As big as that. Cholas was right from India to Indonesia, but here it was Attak to Cuttack, which is a similar area in terms of land, same areas. Now, if you compare that to any Islamic empire, was not so big. It was either Delhi Sultanate, which was like few districts, because I have seen reports where, and I have myself put in my book, one of my books, they never moved out of the Red Fort. The forts that they made, they would just be around 10 kilometers perimeter around the fort, not more than that. After that, they had to rule by the armies. And Shivaji Maharaj's empire, you correct me there, please, that it was not ruled by the armies. So civilians who were ruling the place, civilians mostly. Armies were involved only when there is an attack. So the culture of fear, which was established by Aurangzeb and other, is mostly like terrorism. You can say Aurangzeb was a terrorist. And that too a Sufi terrorist, which is another. Sufis, people think it's very secular, but it is not. Most of the terrorism is done by the Sufis. And Sufis were just they saw the bhajans, Hindu bhajans, they copied that and created Qawwali. But
Yeah.
mindset never changed. Recent attacks in Pakistan is also by the Sufis, not by other people. So people also claim that he was very religious, but most many terrorists can be religious also, because they're trying to justify Ravana was religious. So you
Yeah.
can say that way. But point which I want to ask is that there was a joke my grandmother used to say, when Punjabis were doing Bhangra, Shivaji Marathas destroyed the invaders, Islamic invaders. So, and not against anything against Punjabis. I'm half, so nothing against them. But the point which I'm trying to make is the karma and the governance and the focus on the people's welfare is the top of the mind of a dharmic person. Loka samasta sukhinu bhavantu, loka sangraha, all these words, they come from Sanskrit into a dharmic context. Dharma, many Americans think dharma means Buddhism. No, dharma is a Sanskrit word,
Yeah.
which Buddhism is also based on, Vedic. So anyway, so the point which I'm trying to ask you is that, was the establishment of Gurukuls the main reason of Shivaji Maharaj resurgence?
I think you are there. You are right. You said it. Because this is very interesting that how the resurgences took place. Uh, I told you that around 200 years, that entire area, more than 200, 250 years, it was ruled by Islamic invaders. And these Islamic invaders were cruel. They torture the common citizens, Hindu citizens. They didn't allow Hindus to perform their rituals. They didn't allow to perform their pujas. They tried to disturb, destroy the temples. They did everything by which they could convert the Hindus into Islam, but they couldn't do so in a larger extent. So, but what used to happen during that period was the common person was much scared of the any Muslim soldier, any Muslim person, any Muslim citizen. When any Muslim citizen came on the horses, even a person who would have even killed the tiger, he would have got some fear that okay, he is coming. This means that the entire Islamic empire is behind him. So if we do something to him, they all will kill us. So this fear was in the mind. And due to this Gurukul concept, due to Samartha Ramdas Swami, due to Santa Tukaram, during that the Santa Parampara, they sent us, have really created an environment and atmosphere in Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra, and in that area, wherein people were a youth, people, they were really trying to think, no, we should do something. And that had, given some kind of foundation to Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Because of Sant Tukaram, Samartha Ramdas Swami and all, these saints have literally changed the mindset of the people that no, you need not be scared about it. You be brave, be on your own religion, be on your own dharma. If you follow your dharma, no one in the world can dare to touch you. That's what how they taught the common people, and that gave utter confidence to the common people, and that changed the whole thing. So Gurukul and this education system and this kind of mechanism really played a vital role in creating this Hindavi Swarajya by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. That's what I feel.
Thank you so much, Prashantji, because we have effectively debunked all the misconceptions about this. Is one of the first time we have done it in so clearly on this. And before we leave, because it's such an interesting topic, the history of Shivaji Maharaj, the real history, is not being taught in any textbooks.
Yes.
Vietnam, in their war school, teaches this. They defeated Chinese in 1979. They defeated the mighty American army in 1975, 74. China attacked them and they were the weakest. So when the weakest Vietnam defeated that time the formidable Chinese army, and the US used nuclear weapons on, almost depleted nuclear weapons on Vietnam everywhere.
Yes.
And they had the mandate to kill as many as possible. and their word was ugly looking Vietnamese will be attacking, and that's how they attacked them. But still, they used all those things. Now, but that confidence is lost in most of the Hindus today because their faith is weakened consistently by the secular propaganda, which I'll again repeat. Secular means anti, like remove, keeping church out. That's a secular word meaning actual meaning of secularism, which is done in the US and as well as this. They may call Judeo-Christian country on the personal faith, not as a government. Government is freedom from all church, including mosque and including Hindu temples. Now, the point which I'm asking you is that the why that this important lessons about the Indian textbooks is missing in Indian textbooks, and even the people from Maharashtra who have been education ministers, they have publicly said that they have not changed a single word, and they're people from Maharashtra. So Maharashtra has always saved India. It's not New Delhi. It's always Maharashtra has come up. Maharashtra, Odisha, Bengal. These three states. In all these states except Odisha, we all see the decline in the personal identity and also the conviction in their Sanatan Dharma. Why do you think the textbooks are missing right now still? Or what should be done to change them?
I think you are right. First of all, after the independence, probably we would have done a lot of things. In the last session, as I said, that this Macaulay mindset have really couldn't do it during the British period. That was up to 15th August 1947. But after 1947, because we were independent, India would have done that, would have probably rewritten all the textbooks and would have put the real history into that. Unfortunately, that period wherein a nation is rebuilding itself, recreating itself, because nation is very old. We were recreating ourselves, redefining ourselves. Therein, we couldn't define properly. And the mindset, which was having the legacy of the Macaulay mindset, that was so that this Hindu-Muslim unity and anything if you write, and that may hurt the Muslim mindset, that may create a problem and all. That was unfortunately the thinking, the thought process of the rulers, the then rulers. And that's why this Shivaji and Afzal Khan, this meeting, therein there's a lot of debate that used to be there that who attacked first. It is immaterial because Afzal Khan came to Maharashtra just to kill Chhatrapati Shivaji. It was very clear in that. But unfortunately, these kind of things were happening. And that was the reason. The mindset one has to change. And I think this debunking process has started since last probably 4 or 5 years. And still, unfortunately, the unfortunate part of it, public pressure is still required on the education ministers to change all this syllabus, to change or recreate the textbooks and all. And I think in that direction, the work is going on. Let's see how much time it will take.
Thank you so much, Prashantji, and thank you all the viewers for watching. Do watch it on YouTube. I think you'll learn a lot in this session from this session, and you can debunk all your misconceptions. Very major misconception. You cannot attach the word secular to Shivaji Maharaj, number one, because that is a mythology. Because secular word was invented much later on. It's a freedom of church from the government, or the government's freedom from the church. And because of the church excesses, even today, it's still going on. And there was a publicly apology request by the Prime Minister of Canada to the Vatican to, ask for apologies for the massacre of Native Canadians by the church. That is a public now document now. Last week it happened. So, and also the second word is the dharmic word, the word dharma, is more important than secular or any other word, because dharma means doing the right thing, and neither left nor right. So thank you so much, Prashantji. As usual, very engaging and very informative session. And for all the viewers, Do subscribe it and do write articles on sathology.org or sathology.com, or even you can also write on our Twitter platform, and where you can connect with us. Namaskar and thank you.